live feed, because the other one won't go live. I mean, it could be a Zoom to YouTube. I mean, it's bizarre because we're working and your audio's clear and picture's clear. Oh, there you go. There you go. I'll just mute that one now. So what we'll do, we'll go through the questions and answers. We'll see if people pick up on this new link that YouTube will throw out there now. And then we can edit the two together.
Are you able to copy and paste the link in the previous chat? Because the people won't know that we've got a new link, will they?
Sure, bear with one moment. I'll see. Let's just put that in there. Right, there you go. I've just sent that over to the other one. So if anybody's on there, it'll hopefully pop up with that. So shall we answer the questions and then we can edit the two together as two pieces?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, give it a couple of seconds because I think people are transferring over now from the other chat and they are saying it's working. I can see comments saying that they are back on.
Okay, great news. I haven't got yeah, so we've got people coming back over to this one now from the looks of it. Back on, thanks for sorting. Yeah, so we've got them, Daniel, Trini, Alexandra. So there's a few people jumped on there. Shall we start with the questions or pick up with the questions where we were?
Yeah, let's go.
Okie dokie. So the question when we lost it was Sarah is investing overseas and there's obviously currency risk involved where she's bringing overseas investors in onto her projects. How would you handle that? So we're looking at exchange rate risk here.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a few points to talk about. So the first one is who's bearing the foreign exchange risk? Is it you, the developer, or is it on the investor? If it's actually either way, when you create your investment offering, the exchange rate is another stress test level that you have to take into account. So stress test the return of and on the investment for your investor by measuring the impact of say 2, 5, and 10% change in exchange rate. So that's one thing to consider. And the other thing is, so everything that we've been talking about this evening is related to UK investors. So you promoting deals in the UK. So when it comes to promoting deals to foreign investors, you have to be aware of the financial promotion rules in the countries where your investors are located. So that's one thing that you have to be aware of as well when working with overseas investors.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I've got a great question here from Bill Stiles. And he's got some funds and he's looking to put it into his own deal. But at the moment, he hasn't got a purchase. So where do you put your money whilst you're waiting for something of a higher return? Because the bank rates are derisory low. Is there somewhere that you park your cash that gives a slightly better than bank rate return? I think that's a really good question, that.
So unfortunately, the returns are normally directly in line with the risk or the liquidity or lack of liquidity of the investment that you invest in. So if you want to stay liquid to to be able to invest in property projects. Unfortunately, unless you have a solid risk appetite, you don't have many other options but to leave your money in a savings account. If you decide to invest in the stock market, normally if you invest in listed stocks, it's going to be reasonably liquid, but there are market fluctuations. So by the time you need the money, if it's just in a few weeks or in a few months, you may have made a loss. So yeah, if your concern is preserving your capital, but you want to stay liquid, unfortunately, I mean, we haven't figured out anything else other than using bank savings account and waiting until you've got a good project coming your way.
Yeah, a really great answer. It's a risk and return thing, and also who could have predicted, if you'd put your money into stocks and shares, who could have predicted a COVID-19 scenario? And we saw the stock markets and gold and all sorts of asset classes fall like a stone. And if you needed it during that small window, you could have potentially ended up taking less money out. So a really good answer, Antoine. I've got a question from Alpha Apartments. How soon should you lock down the investor's money prior to a project, and who would keep the funds for purchase and development? Should it be the developer? Should it be held in a solicitor's client account, escrow account? How would you deal with that from the investor perspective?
I think this is similar to the question that was asked earlier about taking in money from investors ahead of time. Just bear in mind, from the moment you take the money, the clock starts ticking and you would start having to pay a return on that money. So really, can you afford it? Does it fit in with your cash flow projections? Because you might not know when you get a project, and do you really want to be paying a return on that money while it sits there in an account for 6 months doing nothing?
And if the investment is a secured loan, you want to make sure that you've got something to secure the loan against. So if you don't have a project, you don't have a security to secure the loan against. So I think the best way to do it is just wait until you've got that project, and then you can then ask the investor for the funds. So the issue with that is you want to check the reliability of your investor ahead of time. So you want to make sure that the funds are available when you need them, and the investor is still keen to go ahead. So that's why you check proof of funds, and that's why you communicate well with your investor and check with them whether they have any changes in circumstances that may prevent them from investing in your project.
Yeah. I mean, the secondary part of that question was to do with if it's a development project, does the developer get all the money up front, or does it stay with the solicitor, go into escrow? How would you approach that?
So if it's a development project, it's going to depend on how much you need and when. So for the scale of the projects that we have done, we were not funding 100% of development finance for a development project. So we have not come across a situation where the money was only released gradually for the project. With that in mind, I don't know how, for instance, a crowdfunding platform does it, or a senior lender does it effectively, because they need to have an IMS visit the site and confirm that certain works have been done before releasing the next tranche of the project. But that's not something that I'm aware of. I mean, it's not something I'm familiar with.
Well, from a developer's perspective, to share it from that side of the fence, what typically happens is funds will sit within an escrow or within the lender's account. I'm working with Blend at the moment. They're retaining the funds in their client account, and upon a QS, a quantity surveyor, coming out, vouching that we've undertaken certain works, producing certain invoices to demonstrate that the work's done match the invoices, the QS will sign off, and then a drawdown of that amount of funds will be permitted. So that's it from a developer's perspective, but different lenders work in different ways. So looking at more questions, I mean, we've got questions coming in. I'll handle the questions off the old feed, but if you've got questions that I haven't answered on the old feed, pop them on this feed. We've got Dorothy, who said it's a really valuable presentation. She's attended one of your courses, and it was full of great content. There was no fluff, and a huge thank you to Karen and Antoine. And I think we'd have lost that if I hadn't brought that point over, and I think that's really good. M7 Properties said, could you share the link again in this feed, because they can't see it in this feed. And Sarah Waters talked about branding investor packs. Is it important to have a logo, a brand, a consistent theme across social medias and websites, or is that not too important? How do you perceive that?
So our focus is, our focus is on content, the substance of what you are saying. So what we like to see is consistency across all your material. So what you put in your investor pack should match what you are putting out on your social media platforms. It could be something as simple as you saying, you currently, your previous work experience was such and such. And if we go onto your LinkedIn profile, we want to see that the information matches. In terms of like logo branding, I mean, we're not marketing expert, and I know there are things that people say about the use of color schemes. So I think for that, you need someone with marketing expertise to comment on it. For us, it's all about the content. You could send us something that's just text with no fancy logos. We are quite happy with that, because at the end of the day, it's the substance that matters, not the pretty fluff around it.
But outside of the pretty fluff around it, there are great ways to use visuals to prove a point, or to explain things in an investment offering. So yeah, creativity goes a long way when it comes to your investor pack, and there are really smart ways to make the best use of the space and use great layouts to prove your points and to support your analysis and present when presenting to investors.
Yeah. I think branding and so forth is important, but it's substance over form, isn't it? That has to be the summary on that one. Substance over form.
And your reputation is your top brand as well. So if you got solid recommendations, ideally on your LinkedIn, that's what people want to see. So if you worked with investors in the past, get them to write you a recommendation.
That's a good top tip there. That is, if you didn't pick up on that, get investors you've worked with and other stakeholders in your projects to put comments on your LinkedIn profile, endorsing what you've done and giving a feedback on the project. Really good top tip there. That was, Anton. Love that one. Sarah's full of questions tonight. She's posted one here. Are the angel loans that you put in backed by a legal agreement put together by a solicitor, or how do you do it?
Yes, it's a must. Always have an agreement and always have a solicitor look over it. These are must-haves when you're looking to lend money for any type of project, not just property.
Yeah.
We see a lot of people looking for shortcuts, asking for templates to be circulated or downloading it from Google. Really, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Like a agreement needs to be protecting your position or the investor's position, and only a solicitor will be able to create a document that is right for the project. And more than anything, you are also relying on the solicitor's PI cover. If they don't do something or they make a mistake, you have a recourse to action. Whereas if you download a template and there are some clauses in there you don't understand, it's not really going to help anyone at the end of the day.
No. It amazes me that people try and do this on the cheap. And for argument's sake, Karen, Antoine, will you lend me £100,000? By the way, I've got this template I got free off Facebook. Is that good enough for you? Am I setting my stall out how I intend to demonstrate that the project is going to run. Builders, will you come and work for free? Can I get the building materials for free? Architect, you don't do it. Why cut corners, especially, I mean, from an investor's point of view, the thing that amazes me most is, generally speaking, the developer tries to present an agreement. Now, my view is it should be the investor who's presenting the agreement, because often the developer's agreement is obviously written and loaded in a way that protects the developer. What's your thought on that? Sorry, I'm on a hobby horse here.
No, well, I mean, depending on the amount and the project, I mean, often we would expect the developer to be covering the legal cost for both our solicitors and their solicitors. So it's no different to you maybe going to a lender for finance, and then the lender will expect you to cover their legal cost as well. And you can get your solicitors to do it on a dual representation basis, but you are expected to cover their legal cost in order to borrow money from them. And really, it's no different for us.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And you should be paying both sides costs effectively if you're borrowing funds. It sends the wrong message if you try and be a cheapskate, in my view. Would you agree with that as the investor?
Yeah, because it doesn't really work with one solicitor. A solicitor cannot represent both parties without there being a conflict of interest. So it can be the same firm of solicitors if they have good, I think, Chinese walls between them so that they can appoint different people to represent you. But otherwise, each party needs to have their own legal representation. It is just, for better protection.
Totally. So I think that was a really comprehensive answer. Yogesh has got a dilemma. Should he borrow funds from his close friends and family?
I mean, that one is entirely up to you, isn't it? Mixing business with pleasure. If it goes really well, happy days. If it doesn't go well, you're risking family relationships.
Christmas could be fun.
Yeah.
you can't treat your investors differently because they are your family. You have to apply the same amount of care and diligence and make sure that they understand the risks involved in the investment that they are considering making.
Yeah.
It could be riskier because your grandmother or your mother might be more willing to part with their money just because you're their son. But should you be taking their money if you haven't provided them with all the information they should have? That's a question you should ask yourself.
Yeah, I think I would approach it from the point of view of, if other investors are prepared to invest in it, then it would be a safe project for somebody to look at their family as an alternate investor. But if other people are going, no, I'm not going to invest, a fallback position of your family is not a good sort of borrowing or lender to rely on. They're lending out of, we know you, like you, and we trust you, but other people are not trusting that particular project for a reason.
Yeah. It's important to make sure that your investors understand the risks, because when everything goes well, it's fine. But that's when things don't go as planned, that you want to make sure that your investors are savvy enough and understand what's going on and what you're doing. And so, a prerequisite when you take investors' money is, it's your responsibility to make sure they understand what they're getting involved in.
Absolutely. I mean, there's an old Latin saying, caveat emptor, buyer beware, but you have a duty of care because you are borrowing somebody else's money. And I think in situations like that, although caveat emptor applies, you should go above and beyond because it's your reputation. One bad project, your reputation's shattered, and it's like a glass vase or a precious ornament. Your reputation is everything to you. So I'll stop ranting on that one. Anyway, Alexander's asked, do you prefer a prospectus pack to be printed, or is it okay to send them on email in a printer-friendly format like a PDF? I guess that will depend on the investor to some extent, won't it? But how do you approach it?
It depends on the investor. I mean, like we've never asked to get investor packs in the mail. Why not? But yeah, no, I think soft copy is best, unless the person you're sending it to doesn't like a soft copy. Nothing to add on this one.
Yeah. I think it's, to me, I think in these modern times, especially in COVID lockdown times, a PDF version that can be shared with a solicitor and other advisors, your accountants, is probably preferable, rather than you having to pop down the photocopy shop and run off 26 copies. Not as user friendly as it the old school way of paper.
And make sure it's a PDF. So if it's a soft copy, make sure it's a PDF so that the information cannot be modified. So you send it, and they can't change the info that's on the investor pack that you send. Very good advice.
Very good advice. I've got an interesting one from Rachel. Rachel's said, if you had an investor pack that contained all the necessary relevant information and you liked the developer, but they're a first-time developer, they've got no case studies to share, would you invest in them?
So we have decided to not invest with first-time developers, but it doesn't mean that every investor is going to behave the same way. So just because we want to see experience doesn't mean that other investors will want to see the same. So I'm sure you'll come across some people who find you investable, even though you have not done any projects just yet.
Yeah. Well, I've got a follow-up with Alexandra here from the previous question, which was Alexandra's mum wouldn't invest until several other people had invested in projects with them successfully. So it's interesting how the market splits, isn't it? And how some family approach it.
And I think you're raising a very interesting point. So there's the experience in property, so having done projects, and there's also the experience of working with investors. So on our side, we want to invest with people who have experience in property, but not necessarily have experience working with investors. But if you got both, it's the magic combo. And if you've done it well, and people speak really well about the experience of investing with you, then you've got a great thing going.
Yeah, well, what you tend to find is investors come back for more, because if you've done a project, it's been successful, and you've got another one, you've got a track record, you've got a relationship built up, and it tends to be a little bit of momentum gets going, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and what we're looking to establish is long-term relationships. We're not after one-off investments, but exactly as you said, Andrew, we want to do one investment, and it's going to be our test. And if it goes well, we'll be reviewing other investment opportunities with that same person in the future.
Perfect. Love the answer. And if you're out there and you've got a project, I'm sure you're always looking for projects to appraise and so forth. So I would recommend getting in touch with Karen and Anton, and I'd also suggest you actually follow the course first before you send them your investor pack. Otherwise you're likely to get a no. But that's not me plugging the course. It's saying that you're active investors, and
we have become very picky when it comes to the investor pack. So our requirements and expectations are very high.
No, you can afford to be. An interesting question from Leslie about ethics here. I mean, putting aside that she's done all of the compliance, ticked on the box for the anti-money laundering, and that she's registered with PRS and other stuff. What would you expect to see if somebody was promoting an ethical investment? And would you get involved in that sort of thing? I mean, how do you perceive it?
So I'm not sure what ethical would mean in this context, but maybe we can share one example. So someone we've worked with on the investor pack very recently, the company is interested in the environment. And one of their values or one of their principles is to donate some of their profit to charities that protect the environment, and also something very simple. They one of their values is just try to recycle as much as possible, or when they build, is to use as little material as possible. And for the properties that they hold on to, they try to use green energy tariffs as well. So if that qualifies as ethical investment in some way, yeah, this is definitely something that that's going to resonate with us. But it can't be, the deal has to be great at the same time, because yeah, first and foremost, it's an investment opportunity.
Yeah. I think you make an important point at the very end there. The deal has to stack, and the ethical values that go behind that might add a little bit of extra to sway you to invest in that deal. I mean, I do social housing, for example, and as those who are regulars of the Great Property Meet know, at Christmas we do a charity auction. John Corey, who we mentioned earlier, has very generously given his time and awards before. And this Christmas, we took 65 homeless people off the streets for 28 days and nights and fed them. Now, that's all part of what I do. There's press releases out there in the local press of us giving the checks over, and we did a big award ceremony live at the Property Meet as well to the charities who received those funds. So that, to me, as well as investing in the social housing, I follow that through by giving back to the community as well. So it's how you treat society as a whole, and it's not just the little bits, is it, that are out there. Anyway, less about me. This isn't about me.
I mean, it's also about you. I'm sure they
I
want
was
to know
just
about
promoting a good cause, Hope for and LWS Leamington Spa, which are two homeless charities who actually take rough sleepers off the streets during the winter, and it's such a good cause, you can't help but give them a plug, can you? So looking at this, we've got more questions coming in. The investor done that one. Leslie wants to know, what interest rates are you looking for these days?
Well, the question is, how much risk are you asking us to take? Because the
Right
reward
answer.
has to be commensurate with the risk.
and Sarah said we've missed one of her questions about open days, which
yeah, it's just 4 up there, where she's asking whether we would want to see a developer's recent projects in the flesh prior to investing, and how about during and after the project.
So realistically, traveling is not an option at the moment. So we have to be realistic when it comes to what our expectations are. And again, every investor is going to be different. Some are going to want to meet with you face to face to see the site. But it's always great to get to see what a developer has done, and like when they drive you around their investment area, and you get a sense of how they understand what's going on, how much they understand the market at the same time. So yeah, for investors who have the time and are interested in going on site, I think, these like investor days on the ground have a significant amount of value. Yeah, the value is great for those who are interested in attending.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got a last question here before we do a wrap, unless there's any last questions, because I'm conscious that you guys must be, well, I've brought mine ready for the end. I've got my bottle of banana beer here. So you guys must be getting parched. I'd offer you a beer, but social distance.
It's fine.
We've got a last question here, which is from Leslie. What kind of risks should we be paying attention to, Ray, the question about interest rates. So you sort of batted back the answers to, well, the interest rate will depend on the risk. Leslie's probing about what you perceive as risk and how you would look to mitigate that risk.
So let's look at two scenarios. Let's look at an equity investment. So you, the developer, you're selling shares in your project. So the expected return on investment would be similar to what you as a developer is targeting when it comes to the return on GDV or the return on cost. So we're talking 25%, 25% and up on an annualized basis. If we look at a loan, the main driver is going to be, the main criteria is going to be how much security is in the loan. So if the loan is secured against the first charge, either on the target property or another property, and the loan to value is reasonable, then we'd be targeting somewhere around 10% minimum for the first charge. And if we're looking at a second charge, again, the loan to value is realistic. We'd be looking at 15% and more for that, subject to the deal being an attractive opportunity, obviously. But I hope that gives some guidance on our expectations.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Sarah's thanking everybody for a fantastic presentation. You've given so much value to developers. She's given you a hug as well. So well done, both of you. And
thanks, Sarah.
All that I can sort of say is you have been phenomenal. You've certainly fielded the best part of 100+ questions tonight. And even despite the technical glitch where Zoom and YouTube decided to disconnect from each other, my apologies to everybody, and thank you all for migrating over as well. You've done fantastic. So I would like to say a big thank you to you. Real heartfelt thanks, because this is the sort of thing that I'm passionate about, which is raising standards within the industry, helping to improve the quality of investing that's going on, and protecting private investors, because I'm seeing quite a few, and I wouldn't like to say that I predict a market slide, but if a market slide does come, then there could be an awful lot of private investors who potentially could be losing money because equity that was in the deal and they've lent on, shall we say, a second charge, the risk end of the project, they might lose if the market falls because the developer might not be able to get the money out of the project that they'd hoped for. So I'm using this as a piece to try and help raise standards, and I thank you very much. And I know we've discussed doing some more and working with others in the industry to improve standards there as well. But if everybody can just say a huge thank you and put your comments so that Karen and Antoine can read those in the chat box, that would be appreciated, because they've worked so hard for so long tonight and they've been brilliant. And
we wanted to thank you, Andrew, as well for having us, for so many people joining us and still being with us at 9:21. So yeah, more than almost 2.5 hours after we started tonight. It's been great, and the questions have been really good.
I think that's actually a record for one of our online meetings. I don't know how we've managed to keep going that long, but the engagement has been phenomenal from the audience, and yeah. I think it's a topical subject.
Definitely. A special mention to Sarah, who I told to come with all her questions, and she didn't disappoint. So thank you very much about putting all your questions in the chat. But thank you to everyone else as well for contributing.
Yeah. To follow up on what you said, Andrew, yeah, so raising the standard is something we feel very strongly about as well, because everybody's heard horror stories in the world of property. And yeah, some people are doing things really, really wrong. and a number of people don't necessarily know how to do their due diligence. So, what the concrete steps and actions are when it comes to doing due diligence on people. So yeah, as you said, this is something you're very much interested in working on with people and spreading the word when it comes to doing good due diligence on people and project to make property investing a safer place.
Yeah, well, that's brilliant. It's nice to see there's people on both sides of the fence trying to raise standards, and I applaud you for that. And I also applaud you for being brave enough to sort of talk out on the subject, because I imagine there's a lot of developers out there going, I wish they'd shut up because they're making life hard for me. And keep it up. I will help you have a platform to get that message out there. I think it's really important.
As a developer, it's your opportunity to stand out and do things right, communicate with your investors right before, during, and after a project. Have a great investor pack, just to make sure that you make all the sharks look awfully bad, and you get investors in the deals, because if you do things right, then you deserve to get investors in your project.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And we will have to, after lockdown, have lunch again down at the Shard, because that was a lovely experience that we shared last year. And all that remains for me to say is a huge thank you to Antoine and Karin. It's been a phenomenal evening. A quick reminder to everybody, next Monday at 10 a.m, unfortunately our time, but 7 p.m. Australia time, we have a live from Australia with my very good friend René de Koning, who's an international speaker on body language. And he's going to be sharing what we should be doing now, why we're where we are, and how we can present ourselves better in our online digital communications, which is likely to be the future. So that's a 1 hour special next week at 10 a.m. on Monday morning. So thank you very much. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for putting up with the technical glitch where Zoom and YouTube decided to disconnect. And we'll see you back shortly. If you haven't done so already, I'd love your feedback. If you subscribe and put comments on the channel, it would be greatly appreciated. And if you hit the bell icon, it'll remind you when we have another live or we release a video. And we've got some interesting series coming up very shortly. Thank you, everyone. And we'll look forward to seeing you soon.